Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Michael Hainey, Head of Product Strategy and Outbound Product Management here at Galileo Financial Technologies. Today, we have assembled some of the best and brightest in the industry to discuss something that is top of mind to many banking executives today. They know that it's time to modernize the system which sits at the heart of the bank, namely their core processor. However, they often struggle to build the business case to do so. So with my colleagues on this panel, we hope to share our experiences and best practices with you, our audience, to help you begin your successful journey towards core transformation, balancing risk and growth to help you achieve your goals. With that, let's begin. And first, we'll do a round of introductions. I'll start with Ritesh Rajani.
Hi, nice to meet everyone here, Michael. Thank you for introducing me and including me on the panel. I'm Vice President for Galileo Financial Technologies, responsible in particular for enterprise core banking sales. I have a background in selling to banks for the last 20 years, and in particular core banking and digital banking sales for the last 10 years, working across some of the well-known names in the industry.
Jeremy, you're next up.
Hi there. Thanks for having me today. I'm Jeremy Rishel, CTO at SoFi Technologies. I've worked across a wide set of consumer and B2B facing technology products and industries over time. Been at SoFi for about 2.5 years now. I'm responsible for overall technology and product strategy and execution.
Great, thank you. And Dean.
Yeah, hi Michael. Hi everybody. Nice to see you guys. Dean Nikolakis. I'm a partner in our banking transformation team at PwC. Basically, my career has spanned multiple generations of technology shifts, starting with when the internet happened. I was the CIO of loans.com when people were trying to figure out what the internet actually was going to be and how it was going to work, through mobile strategies that I've done as the iPhone came about, and over the last some number of years focused on bank modernization, both helping build out our design time and our runtime assets that we're using as we advise clients in their modernization journey. So thanks for allowing me to join the fun here.
Thanks for joining today, Dean, and hopefully we figured out a little bit about how the internet can be utilized over those years. Ritesh, I actually want to pose the first question to you. Given your role, you're in frequent conversations with banking executives of all types, and they're interested in learning about potentially adopting next generation core banking systems. What are some of the reasons they share with you about why they're beginning this journey?
Michael, thank you so much for asking that question. It's a very pertinent question. But before I start, I do want to congratulate you on assembling this amazing panel. I obviously work with a lot of banks, particularly on core banking, and Dean is a constant name across all those conversations. He's working with all these banks in various ways. And again, Jeremy, very proud to share the stage with you. Fastest growing bank in the nation, 10 million members as of this month. So very well done. So very, very proud to be here. In terms of banks and what they are thinking of, I look at it as, dealing with 5 blind men trying to figure out the elephant. And depending on whom you speak to, you kind of get a different answer. When I speak to people on the technology side of the organization, the biggest pressing issue that they face is the dwindling talent that they have to maintain these old legacy undocumented systems that have been running for the last 40, 50 years. And given where technology has gone from COBOL to C++ to Java and now to even more modern languages, they are finding it very difficult to retain and maintain the talent that they have, and also to attract new talent to work on projects they want because of the legacy that they have. So that's from the technology side. When I look at the business, they're looking at quick returns. How do we get reduced time to market for the products that we're launching? How do we get quick wins? How do we make revenue out of these things? So that's another challenge that they have. But I think overall, banks need to consider how they lower their total cost of ownership, not just across the next quarter or the next financial year, but across the next horizon of 2, 3, 5 years, where they know they have to sunset these systems, they know they have to take the risk, they know the advantages that these the new generation technologies are bringing to the table. How do we look at the product holistically? And I think that's what I'm seeing in the market is more and more movers in the market are looking at it not just from a single objective, whether it be a risk or whether it be a business, but it should be how do we get our bank ready for the future, which is about competing with the Apples, Amazons, the Chimes, and the other fintechs of the world? And that's the kind of conversation we're having at the moment. And I'm sure Dean and Jeremy will have more to add to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And jump in, guys, anytime. I did want to pull on one of the threads that you talked about. One of the things a decade ago when I was working at a very large global bank, the mantra was what we call two-speed architecture, right? Where we invest in the front end or customer experience layer. We adopt new methodologies like Agile and DevOps. And it was okay that the back-end systems, such as the core banking system, maintained its legacy technology infrastructure and the legacy ways of working, which we all nicknamed as waterfall in those days. And then suddenly we hit this wall, right, where the bank wanted to launch new types of products and services and realized, well, my product processor needs to move at the same speed as the front end. So time to market is something that we hear quite a bit when it comes to the rationale to modernize the core.
That's absolutely the case, Michael. And not just time to market from the deployment of like the traditional, digital banking historical model, but I think that the historical model of we sell in face-to-face channels and we service in contact centers and digital has really completely been exposed as not really the model that is the most prevalent and the most pervasive, as people instead want to move to models like Jeremy's building at SoFi, where the advice and the ongoing helping of the client through whether it be education or a set of solutions or a set of products that get them towards their goals is built into the digital experience and supported by humans when necessary. It's really changed the whole paradigm from the traditional, channels play certain roles to now it's really digital first and human supported when necessary. It's broken up the entire kind of service and sales model to now need to be one that's much more intertwined. And that puts pressure on, frankly, the traditional structure of the channels and the traditional structure of the core and what role it plays. Even the concept of what the product boundary is really changed.
100%.
And I think, Michael, you raise through your kind of example there sort of a really interesting point. The technical architecture really shapes what is possible, and as Dean was describing there as well. And from our vantage at SoFi, we're growing very fast. We're innovating fast. Our goal is to deliver best in the world capabilities that integrate across products and really deliver personalized, intelligent capabilities that break out of the kind of traditional molds. And that is simply not possible in a technology architecture that has some of the characteristics of legacy systems. It can only be done in modern systems that have the kind of technology shape, the deployment characteristics, the operational characteristics, the cost characteristics that something like Cyberbank does. And so it's just really fundamental to our innovation journey for SoFi overall to adopt that kind of core technology behind some of our most important products.
Yeah, you bring up two really great concepts there. One is that we hear from the so-called neobanks or the fintech banks a lot about this concept of product velocity. I think SoFi, even though you've gotten your banking charter now and officially you are a bank, you have the product velocity that we see that comes from your fintech background in terms of the number of products and the speed at which you launch new offerings. So that's wonderful. And the second thing you bring up is about a lot of the newer generation of financial products that we've been seeing really combine the best of payments, deposits, and lending attributes. So buy now, pay later is a great example of that, of course, which SoFi has that offering as well. And those would not have been possible in highly siloed core processors of the past, where these three concepts were in distinct systems with no interaction, no reusability of microservices libraries or anything of that nature. So those are really, really great points. I think the audience, you've all figured out, we have three very distinct companies represented on the panel today. Of course, SoFi representing an actual bank, PwC as a consultancy and system integrator, and of course the solution provider that is Galileo. So we're getting the perspective from very different angles, which I absolutely love. And with that, Dean, I want to kind of ask you a question. Your firm, you're often providing these kind of consulting services that initially help the executives build that business case for change. And core modernization, as you well know, in a risk-averse industry like banking, is often considered analogous to heart surgery, or some people might describe it as changing the tires on a moving car. So the appetite is often understandably low, especially outside of the technology organization in the bank. So what else might help convince business or operations executives or even the board of directors to transform their legacy product processor? And I'll just give you one quick comment that I had from a prospect last year, which was a CFO of a bank who said, "I will never, as long on my watch, we'll never transform our core until after I retire." So that kind of shows you some of the fear that's out there. So I'd love to hear, as you're helping, from putting your consulting hat on, as you help these executives build a business case, what is it that they end up looking for that helps them ultimately get over that hurdle?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the assumptions that people have historically made that we are appeasing people that is not required is the idea that this has to be a big bang event. And that you've got to somehow take 50 years of functionality that you've been building into whatever system you have and fully cover it and improve on it and then do some sort of a overnight conversion or anything. There's really no one who's approaching modernization. I think some started down that path, but the real people that are making progress towards modernization are doing so in a way where they are standing up the modern, let's say, capability next to the legacy capability and figuring out a stepwise model for how to introduce the new platform in parallel to the old platform. And then over time, figuring out a model where they can maintain an adequate level of coexistence for people like channel supports, contact centers, branches, that digital experiences that need to bridge products that are in both, and then figuring out a more stepwise model for how they're going to start to move, the members or customers over from old to new. And I think that getting people to realize first that they don't have to, in fact, they would be unwise to approach it as a big bang, is a first step towards getting people comfortable that this is a journey that they can start down. And then it gets into the point that you made out before, and I think, Ritesh, your opening remarks about tech obsolescence is the most tangible kind of burning platform, let's say, issue. And so then the next question that we are guiding people on is, okay, what are the other levers that actually provide business value, whether they be product and pricing flexibility to start to do things like relationship pricing instead of individual product pricing, or whether they be things like moving to a real-time event-based environment that then allows you to do things like not have 3-day windows where you have payments coming in on Friday, and on a 3-day weekend you're not settling them till Tuesday morning, and that all of the operational challenges that comes with reconciling things that get out of sync when you end up with 3-day windows and batch posting. And so a lot of it ends up being, all right, now let's figure out what is the sequence of business value that actually the business sees value in, and then how do you build a plan to start to modernize in a sequence that allows them to, get benefits along the way.
Let me give you
Take the big risk. No one wants the push all my chips in the middle and I'm gonna roll the whole career on a weekend. No one really wants to do that.
So, Dean, I was sitting with the group CIO of a top 20 bank in the country, having the exact same discussion, right? I think they see the path they need to take. But his question was, Ritesh, I'm sitting on a mainframe system, deprecated. It's very low cost for me to run. I'm seeing it as like right now the market is having minimal impact on our business. We're still profitable, we're still growing. What I'm trying to figure out is what is the inflection point at which you need to start making that change. I think that's the biggest challenge from a sales perspective that I face. Everything you said, yes, I think fundamentally people logically agree with what you said. They all see the path of how to do it. I struggle to find the inflection path, and I look to Jeremy, who's made that decision well in advance of the time when he needed to. And what I love is the crawl, walk, run approach that SoFi has taken to this, which I think if more people would do that, client experience would definitely improve across the industry, just like SoFi has done.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell you a little bit about the approach we've taken and why, and I think it very much is in the spirit of what Dean has talked about quite well there. One is, I started my career in the Marine Corps, and I learned early on that if a thing is going to be hard, you better get started now. Like sort of waiting doesn't make it easier. And I think that's true in sort of product and technology and business kind of transformations as well. But certainly to Ritesh's point, we first leveraged Cyberbank to launch a buy now, pay later product 2 years ago. And then we continued the adoption evolution of Cyberbank with our partner banking capabilities, which we just announced publicly about a month or so ago. And I will tell you through that process of leveraging Cyberbank for that, we had aggressive timelines as we always do with the pace that we move. And we were able to deliver against that, partnering with Galileo ahead of schedule, like meaningfully ahead of schedule, which was, music to my ears and to the business owners' ears. And we're now underway on moving our checking and savings products, SoFi Money, and our retail banking operations on top of Cyberbank as well. And so certainly there's a lot of execution ahead, but so far the track record has been great. We're fully realizing the advantages that we thought we would have by the adoption of these approaches. And I think it will, to the points also about sort of technology obsolescence and kind of skill set obsolescence, we confront some of those challenges as well. And we want to move to an environment where our engineers and our product thinkers are working in a modern world where we have access to the talent and skill sets that we need to develop that, and where we can leverage services from a team like that has the capabilities of Galileo, where we've just had fantastic success leveraging. So as the Galileo platform gets built out with more and more capabilities, obviously here talking about core banking, from my perspective, thinking of it from the sort of SoFi product and banking side, we want to leverage these capabilities from Galileo as a world-class service provider. I don't need to recreate that capability on my side. And so shifting away from the operational burden of doing that is going to save SoFi energy and time and money and allow me to shift resources and investments into product innovation that can really continue to differentiate us with our customers.
That's great. And what I love about this discussion is that you can almost never have a discussion with a bank about, moving to a new core system. The short path is what system am I moving to? But the harder question is, how am I going to get there? So you guys have already started to talk about two key things that we see. One is that sort of progressive and iterative approach, or crawl, walk, run, and making sure that at the end of each phase, you're delivering some kind of business value, whether that's revenue generating or a new customer experience or whatever it might be. And we also see core modernization is often part of larger corporate mandates that they've set for themselves, such as shifting to cloud infrastructure, changing the pricing paradigm to usage-based pricing, increasing automation, all those things. Core modernization can be linked to those larger mandates. Ritesh, you preempted my next question, which was for Jeremy. SoFi is a bit unique, as we talked about, in that it was a fintech that got its banking charter, and that, in a sense, required you to bring in some of the so-called back office or below the glass, as we sometimes nickname these systems, in-house from what used to be done by your partner banks. And so I'm curious, you started to talk a lot about the factors that caused you to want to replace the ledger technology that you had. I'm wondering if we can just expand a little bit more on that, and then what else are you seeing, behind the scenes, in the rest of the back office that would complement your sort of modernization journey? Are there any other platforms the bank is considering along with the core to modernize?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to briefly recap maybe some of the things I mentioned, I can expand on the latter part of your question, Michael, which is a great one. Definitely continuing to accelerate innovation through a modern architecture. We already see the benefits of that in areas where we've done it. I'm 100% confident we're going to realize those benefits as we more fully adopt Cyberbank. It's just fundamental to being able to move at the pace that we want to move. Customers are demanding. They want personalized services. They are developing expectations for the financial services industry that they see from other industries that are probably, frankly, more technology forward and have done more to bring that to life for customers, whether they're consumers or sort of businesses. And so we think there's real opportunity there to innovate at that kind of pace within the financial services space. For sure, as a second point, the kind of move away from what is really obsolete technology around which there is a really meaningful dwindling skill set is a real thing. At our scale, even really have to think about the composition of our workforce. How do we get in place the talent that we need from a human perspective and also from a technology perspective for the innovation across the years ahead? We're competing for that talent in an increasingly sort of technology-dominated world across sort of all industries. And therefore, being left behind with sort of legacy technologies for which there's a really finite number of people who can even work on them would not be a position I'd want to be in. So that's sort of a second big component. I think the third component, also is just the shift of time, attention, and money to things that are really part of how we deliver best to our customers, and trying to shift as much of the responsibility, even for kind of core dimensions of technology, to people that have real expertise for whom it's their business, which in this case is Galileo. Delivering Cyberbank is just a great solution. We develop a lot of technology ourselves. We have very deep technical expertise on the SoFi side, but we also work with a large number of partners. And there's none better, from my vantage than the work we've been able to collaborate with Galileo on. And so using them as a world-class partner as part of that overall solution just has huge advantages for us and lets us concentrate our kind of direct resources in some other areas. And then finally, to sort of the end of your question around the kind of other services, especially given the pace at which we're growing. We just announced crossing 10 million members. For sure, as that kind of scale increases, there are a lot of other kind of business processes and customer delivery processes that are connected to the banking core system. And what we've started to see is that there's real opportunity to innovate there as well, and to apply technology to help us scale those processes, to operate them efficiently, to add intelligence into those processes. And having the core banking architecture and the core banking technology have the kind of modern, adaptive, modular, service-oriented character to it that Cyberbank does is just essential. We could not scale the processes that we need to continue with our growth and innovation if we were relying on what is really a kind of obsolete form of technical design and these legacy technologies. And so to the point of your question, we see the impact, the positive impact of the shift to a modern core banking architecture across a whole bunch of surround applications and processes that, even as we got into it, I think we probably didn't realize the depth with which it would be important to those as well to make this innovation. But certainly as we're now on that journey, we're seeing that. And I'm sure that will continue to unfold.
I know part of the reason I brought up the latter part of that question is to highlight that a lot of these newer generation core banking systems are much leaner, meaning we do a lot less with them. They're not necessarily built in with treasury management systems and general ledgers and statement engines. And it gives, some people view that as a bit of a freedom, right? It gives them the ability to select best of breed solutions and then obviously integrate them together rather than expecting everything to come from the core system itself. And so, I happen to know some of the other SoFi projects that are going on that, where you're adopting very modern solutions that surround the core as well. And another thing to pull on, and I'd love, Dean, for you to comment on this, is, SoFi being a newer company, technology forward company, almost has no issues, right, embracing software as a service, whereas a lot of legacy incumbent banks are still a little bit nervous about, especially for something like a core system, what does it mean if I not only put it in the cloud, but give it to a third party to manage, especially among the larger banks. So I'd love for you to talk about all of you to talk about software as a service, how it's changing the core banking industry, and what can make people more comfortable with it.
Yeah, this is to me a fascinating shift that I think's happened over the last couple of years, and I see Ritesh, you're probably seeing the same thing I am, right? So, especially at the largest banks, I would say as recently as like 2 or 3 years ago, every one of them was going on the assumption that they're standing up their private cloud and the core is going to run in their cloud, they're going to manage it. And I would say almost to a person, every one of them has shifted course now. And part of that has come from the fact that they've seen how the SaaS providers in these modern cores have built significant talent and discipline around resiliency and multi-regional operations, even active configurations and things that they frankly don't believe that their cloud team could do it better. And so once they get through, obviously the comfort that they need to go through around the protection of customer data. And I think what's happened is many of them have already done the move to moving other parts of the bank, even their GL, to run in SaaS offerings, that they've now gotten more comfortable with the idea that, okay, as long as the right security protections are in place, it's actually more effective for them. The same thing you said, Jeremy, right? There's certain things you want to focus on. Operating the cyber bank is not one you really need on your priority. Let's let Galileo do it for you better, right? I think they're coming to that same solution, that same conclusion. So even the very largest banks. Now, I am seeing some international banks where they have certain rules around, needing to keep, data within their country boundaries and things where they're, having to apply certain disciplines like that. But in the US, for the most part, I'm seeing that SaaS is pretty much, accepted as the better model.
And Dean, I smiled when you started because I clearly remember my very first conversation a decade ago when I started setting core banks with the large Midwestern financial institutions, and cloud was an absolute no-no. The regulators will allow it, we need to stick to our mainframes. And the last 12 months, I've had at least 5 conversations with top 20 banks, all of whom want to go on to SaaS. And I'm very proud of the work that Galileo has done working with SoFi in providing an as-a-service solution where I think we are able to provide SLAs, security, information security, and all other regimens that a bank would want to examine us. I think we'll probably provide them better at scale than the bank would themselves. So very proud of that. Happy to prove that to anyone who might come along. But again, thanks to SoFi for giving us the chance. And that's exactly how we're delivering it for SoFi, taking all that ownership on ourselves and providing it for 10 million members at scale, hopefully in the very near future.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I want to comment, if it's okay, Michael, on something else that Jeremy mentioned, right? Which is the talent shift. So where Jeremy, you started with, owning this, great front end experience and all the main, architecture around it internally. Many of the larger banks out there are actually having to go through a very significant talent shift because their comfort is the mainframe, right? That's their home. That's where they've got 20, 30 years of, experience and people that really know how to build highly resilient systems there. And now that they're shifting to this new model, they're having to retool their whole organization. It's not unusual for us to go to these largest banks. They don't have things like automated testing happening, with every change that's happening. That's a foreign concept on most mainframe systems, right? And so there's a complete retooling of the SDLC and the whole operating environment at most of these places. So it's a substantial change, not just a technology change, but a systems management change as well.
Yeah, I love this discussion because it's in many ways highlighting that the solution providers, the cloud providers are in some ways moving more quickly than the 5,000 banks in the US or the 5,000 credit unions in the US can move. They just can't all expect to have the same level of IT talent, watching the innovation space. And so even sensitive areas like cybersecurity, in some cases, the solution providers are now ahead of what the banks can achieve on their own. And so I think the new challenge for the banks is going to be, even though they're kind of moving their infrastructure to a third-party provider, they have to keep up with what the technology can enable from a business model perspective and from a financial product offering perspective, which is a great segue, by the way, to my next question. What do we see, now that the bank has selected its vendor partner, it's wondering what my next steps are. And these next steps aren't always in the technology space. So I'm going to start with you, Dean, on what kinds of things, and what I'm thinking about here are things like target operating model. What kind of things do they need to think of next now that they've chosen their vendor, so that we don't get into the trap of doing a one-to-one replacement of the technology platform without using the opportunity to change the business model of the bank?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, right? Most banks, especially if you go to the larger banks, are still largely grouped by some amount of business units by asset class. And where that kind of, runs counter to the opportunity here is that the opportunity on the table is to be more customer centric. And I think SoFi is, a great exemplar of doing that, right? Meaning that you don't take something like a need and equate that the serving of that need is a single product from a client. It actually can be a recipe of multiple things put together. And so the easiest example I use is just a basic auto loan, right? Who would think that you would design a business where you say no to your clients 50% of the time? No one would design a business that way, right? But what we end up having is still someone who owns that business line. And what you see is in the deposit side of the business, they're starting to do things like have people start to do things like set up goals where they can start to save for something like a down payment for a car. But what we haven't seen is the bridge that says, not only am I going to give you the ability to set up a goal and start to save into that down payment, but as you qualify, I'm going to show you how much loan you can qualify for. And then when you want to buy the car, it's simply going through that last mile exercise of, putting the collateral behind the loan. That shift to me is where when I know that we're actually kind of starting to make a difference, right? Which is when you start to see people saying, I'm moving towards helping clients achieve their goals, not selling either deposits or selling, loans, but pulling those two together. That shift is really, that's where a lot of our conversations are, is showing people what can happen with these sort of combination products, because the traditional boundaries don't need to be there anymore. Now you can have interworking accounts where balances in one or activity in one can change the qualification for another, which I think that, Jeremy, you guys at SoFi have really led the way around how you treat things like to be activation oriented versus assuming there's a sales and an apply in between every new product that gets turned on.
Mhm.
You guys just have it there, and it's kind of like, hey, when I need my next account, I can just push this button and add it. Right? It's a much more customer-centric way. And I think that shift, Michael, is when we know that, okay, people are getting the opportunity here.
Yeah, totally. It's about no longer just about sort of processing money. It's about how do you help your clients manage their money to meet their goals. So
Exactly.
banks have for too long focused on, which is not a bad thing to focus on, but all the back end processing, but forgetting about what is it that the customer actually needs to get done. So that's great.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of that, the business side of banking has largely been constrained by this technology for most of their careers. And so, that's where I think the point about the SoFis and the more innovative, fintechs that started not being traditional banks really have led the way around describing kind of how the interaction should be, right? Whereas a lot of banks, we're spending a lot of time just teaching people the art of the possible, because they've really been constrained for a lot of their careers by the systems and how they were set up. And now they're not.
I spent the first part of my career in banking, inside banks, and I saw the nexus of incentives and silos across deposits versus lending versus auto, and the fact that we have technology today that can allow you to break that apart. I think the big change required is not necessarily from a technology perspective, like SoFi has proven. It's more about how do you unbundle the bank itself inside and then be able to provide one bank to the market using technology that's already there.
Yeah, I love that. Unbundle and then rebundle it back. That's perfect. And you bring up, again, on this topic of how technology enables, I want to shift, Jeremy, to put your CTO hat on. Obviously, it's not just about replacing one core system for another. There are other things that you're doing to kind of smooth the way, whether it's in the area of integration middleware, for lack of a better term, or data management. What are some of the things that your projects that you're doing around the core to sort of set up success for your core replacement project?
Yeah, one of the things that Dean mentioned actually kind of earlier on in this conversation was this concept of an event-based architecture. And I think if there are kind of two sort of systems architecture themes I would highlight that are pretty fundamental to our approach and to what I think is necessary to have the kind of velocity and adaptive personalized services that we want to provide going forward. One is to be able to be kind of event-based sort of through and through, so that the product can respond, the businesses can respond to the needs of a customer at a given point in time. The second is to be extremely data rich in all facets of how we deliver that, including through data that is truly real time, right? Sort of events that are happening instantaneously that relate to a given member or a given customer that we're serving, and that data not only is sort of real time, but kind of comprehensive about what kind of whatever events that we're describing there, and that data can fuel personalized intelligent services that can help meet the needs that somebody has when they have them, help answer their questions, as Ritesh was talking about earlier, and Dean help kind of educate them as to what is possible and help them feel empowered about their own finances. And so I think both that event-driven kind of architecture concepts and real-time data and kind of intelligent services concepts are pretty fundamental. And those definitely, cyberbank and kind of the modern approach to core banking is definitely an essential element of that. And the capability to integrate nicely the kind of core banking services in this kind of lean core style that we talked about a little bit earlier in the conversation into that surrounding set of kind of data and event architecture capabilities is really important.
Yeah,
I think the realization of the value from event-driven is early stage, because it's a concept that most people in banking don't really understand. It's an industry that's extremely process first in how they think. And so you see, these larger banks spending tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars doing operational risk work to lay out every process and make sure they have every control in place. And in almost every case, those are either a report-driven or a manual process that has a manual control. And in this future model that you described as, the event-driven architecture, you can separate the business operation from the risk and control environment and just have it automatically watch. Like, you can literally see the entire factory floor running in real time as it's happening. It's a very different starting point versus assuming that everything is this invisible process that's happening in the background. Great freedom, but as I think frankly, one of the bigger benefits use cases is actually the operational, second line and first line risk reduction that you can make when you move to this modern architecture. It's just, there are hundreds and in some cases thousands of people in these large banks that are doing these risk control functions because they're manual.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's still a heavy focus on automating highly orchestrated journeys and processes. And that kind of gets blown up with event-driven architectures, but the possibilities are incredible once the mindset shifts at these legacy banks. But I also love the comment around data. As we all know, especially in this world of AI, data is so fundamental. And one of the things we hear about a lot from the banks is complaining about how their legacy core processors not only make it challenging to get at the data in an easy way, data quality, data integrity, but also just the cost that they're sort of nickel and dime just to access their own data, especially if they're in a hosted environment. So I think these two things are very key to modern core modernization. My last question for Jeremy, for you, is, again, Ritesh brought up the fact that SoFi did a crawl, walk, run approach, and now you're into the run phase. The first two were largely what we call greenfield deployments, right? There really wasn't any legacy or very little legacy there. You didn't have to think about things like data migration and those types of things. And now you're going to be doing a true transformation style of program. So how do you think this time, not only you in technology, but also SoFi, the business, how will you measure success differently in this third leg of the project?
I think there are two big things I would think about. One, in terms of the kind of strategic outcomes we expect to get, is our ability to create or innovate in a wider product set much faster. We'll just be able to deliver better products, more integrated. Dean talked really nicely about the ways you can kind of unbundle sort of traditional approaches and repack them. Certainly SoFi as a one-stop shop combination of lots of different kinds of financial services, even beyond kind of banking itself into things like investment sort of products. We know that the sort of core banking capabilities that we'll have with Cyberbank will help us move much faster there. And so that will be one of the outcomes that we expect to observe. The other, if you kind of look inward to our operations and those surround processes, which we've spent some time to talk about, is my expectation is that we're able to scale those faster, more efficiently in terms of people and dollars for that matter, do smarter things with them, and deliver them with sort of lower risk and kind of higher reliability than what we do today. And as a piece of what we were just talking about, we pour lots of energy into the fundamentals of reliability, risk management, information security, and so forth. And I've spent a lot of time on that in other, very large scale, very performance intensive technology products in other parts of my career. And I firmly believe that one of the outcomes we'll see, and certainly one of the outcomes we'll be looking for, is continued kind of progress into that space and the ability to achieve things that we would not have otherwise been able to achieve with a legacy architecture. For example, in a service-oriented, modern kind of API and event-driven architecture, you don't do planned maintenance. Like the idea of turning off SoFi for our customers so that we can introduce a change and make an upgrade is just not something that we tolerate. And so today, when we work with legacy systems that can't really accommodate that concept, we have to do a lot to work around those limitations instead of having the technology work for us. And in a move to something like Cyberbank, which has a sort of modern service-oriented approach to those capabilities, now the technology is an asset to us trying to achieve what we want in terms of safe, reliable delivery to our members. It's not a thing that we're trying to work around. So that, I think there's a whole set of outcomes connected to that: scalability, risk management, security, kind of efficiency in terms of both time and dollars that we'll be looking for in terms of outcomes.
Well, and a much lower cost of change.
Yeah.
Right? You get to these legacy ones where everything's such a monolith. They introduce a new product, it touches on 100 systems for them to get a new product deployed, and they've got to test everything end to end. Nothing's really componentized where you can isolate the change and isolate.
We introduce hundreds of changes into our system per day, and to Dean's point, again, we adapt. We've had to build modern software development, product development methodologies around some of the legacy systems, and that is its own challenge. All of a sudden, not only does that go away, it turns into sort of a positive capability when we've adopted a kind of modern approach to core banking, and now that can just be an asset that will help us, help us introduce change even faster, safer, more efficiently.
Yeah.
I was just saying that's a powerful statement. Being able to make hundreds of changes a day, given your process, that's a very.
There's no bank doing that in their end to end. That's for sure. Maybe in a group of one there.
That's a great high note to end the conversation on. I really appreciate everybody's insights and time today. This was a fantastic discussion, and hopefully this will be the first of many to come. And we can even bring in some of the other solutions that Galileo is providing to SoFi to talk about those as well. So thank you again. This was an excellent panel. To our audience, please feel free to reach out to any of us for your questions and queries and comments. And we look forward to bringing you more insights in the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.